I'm your host, Noel McDermott. I've got a great guest on with me this evening, Stuart Mace, who we're going to be chatting to in just a moment. But just to remind you, if you're listening to this on the 6th of April at 9 p.m. UK time, it's actually live, and it'll be live for the next hour. It'd be lovely to hear from you. You're welcome to join in with us. We stream on a couple of platforms now, I think, on my YouTube channel, but also on Facebook Live on my Facebook page. So you can drop comments there if you wish, or indeed send me something through on this thing, my phone on WhatsApp, which is +44 7506 319 745. So send a message or give me a call, actually. I'll get you online to have a chat. This evening we're going to be talking about workplace well-being issues and going into some depth about it, because Stuart, who's my guest, is currently going through his MA in sort of health and well-being in the workplace. We'll discuss that, exactly what he's doing. After having had a long career in recruitment, which is the really sharp end of it all, to be honest. It's not a job I would choose.
Yeah.
Any sort of sales or anything like that is not a job I would choose. It's hard work, high pressure. So I think we'll get some really interesting insights on all of that and why Stuart has now vectored away from that and gone into looking at well-being issues. So Stuart, hello, welcome
Hello.
to the show. It's really, really cool to have you here.
Thank you.
So I'm interested, given that you come from the background that you did, I guess this is quite a significant vectoring away from where your career has been and where you want to take your career now in terms of sort of work-based. Tell me, first of all, because you're doing quite an interesting degree. We'll go into what brought you into it, but you're doing an interesting postgraduate master's program at the moment. So tell me about this training that you've been going through, because I'm quite...
So it's a master's at University of Nottingham called Workplace Health and Wellbeing. In old money, that's occupational health psychology. But the name was changed, I think, 10 years ago to, I suppose, bring it up to date. And it touches on a broad range of subjects, really around, obviously, the workplace. So it's not necessarily just the health and well-being in general. It's really honing that back into how you can make a difference and looking at promotion, risks, where it will make a difference to an organisation. So it's a research degree, evidence-based or science-based. So it's very much around you're given a topic, or you're given a title, and you're given sort of direction, and it's down to you to go ahead and research that and answer the question as you see fit. So it does bring about critical thinking and looking at things from all angles, and where that helps with regards to, I suppose, the workplace and occupation is very inclusive. So it's not necessarily thinking, well, one size is going to fit all with regards to any sort of intervention. It's very much looking at data, the evidence, and then working that through the business with regards to implementing something. But it's very much, as I say, you can't really have something that's going to just work for everyone. You need to have multiple strands and look at that critical thinking. So
I guess
it's a great course, and it ends off with a research paper, which is something I'm still weighing up what to do it in. That I think is obviously going to be quite a big piece, and something I think I'm really going to enjoy doing.
I guess why I'm interested and why I wanted to give you that space to discuss it is because there's a whole area of sort of workplace well-being which has my head in my hands, to be honest.
Yes.
That's been going on about people just coming in, telling their story and saying, "I'll cure your workforce of everything." All the problems, and I know you're a mental health first aider. I'm not knocking that, but that's not an answer to anything. It's good signposting is fantastic, and we have to say good signposting needs to happen. And I think the mental health first aid training should be done, and I think everybody would benefit from it. So I'm not knocking that so much, but it's not a workplace health program.
No.
Not going to be dealing with the health and well-being issues of your staff.
No.
It's actually equipping people with real skills, which I think is brilliant, and particularly around safer workplaces in terms of suicide. It's a crucial skill, I think, in terms of early identification of people who are at risk of those quite severe issues. With that, it's a good idea, right?
I think with workplace, I think with mental health first aid, what muddied the waters, it was that it is what it is. And actually, the course I did was with Mental Health First Aid England. The course is what it is, but it's how it was interpreted by organisations through no fault of anybody's, through no real fault. I just feel that companies thought this is going to be a solution to the pandemic, shall we say, and people starting to feel a bit depressed, a bit down, or whatever it was. But all of a sudden, I just saw, a rise in companies just investing tens of thousands of pounds in getting hundreds of mental health first aiders on board, thinking that was the solution. It's positive to see a company wanting to spend money on well-being and health and well-being, albeit just mental health is a small part of that. But I think now, a year on, if we could put it, that way, from when there was, I thought, mental health first aid was at its peak, a lot of businesses saying, well, this actually didn't solve what we thought it was going to solve, but yet they are still looking to prepare, or they're still prepared to spend money. So it's putting in a bit of scaffolding within organizations. I'm finding that at some point, somebody who would have to have signed off this spend, which I think is a positive, but it's now looking at, okay, well, we've gone, we've literally just scratched the surface now. Now we need to look at how we can sort of implement more. And this, for me, takes on a whole different aspect. It's I'll be careful how I say this, but it's not for HR, for example, to do this. It's not, health and wellbeing can't be a bolt-on to somebody else's job to do. They've got their own job to do. So, if an organisation is going to take this seriously, then it's, there needs to be a department, really.
So tell me why it shouldn't. I mean, we're talking about, there's different types of organisations. So smaller organisations, people who multitask, etc., and they'll be juggling with different types of issues. So, but let's imagine a medium to large organisation which has departments for doing things. That's what we're going to sort of keep in the back of our mind. Yeah. Discussing this at the moment. So why not a HR department? Why is this health and wellbeing, these issues, not HR issues, do you think?
I think health and wellbeing is everyone's issue within a business. Realistically, I think it does. It affects everyone, and every line manager and every senior leader should have a part to play within well-being, and therefore this trickles down into what companies call culture. I think, and therefore I believe that if you are asking a certain department to do it that has a day job, it's not going to get the due care and attention that it requires. And all due respect, having studied what I'm studying on in term 3 of my master's, there's nothing in HR that suggests that they're qualified to be able to look at the well-being of their staff. Now, obviously, you can have disciplinaries, and you can, if somebody goes sick and there's absence management and what have you, and return to work aspects, which generally will go through HR. But they're literally almost just following process and may have a bit of empathy. It's realistically, have they got the time frame and the bandwidth to actually really look at what's going on within the workplace, and therefore, how are we bringing people back to work? Why are they off work? And where are their issues within the business? So, all due respect, I think it's probably paying lip service when it does need a real deep dive and a deep discovery, irrespective of how big a business is.
I think we need to unpack some of it and discuss it, because it's not necessarily the people who are going to watch this show or are watching it are not necessarily au fait with these dynamics, and I understand that. I want to say off the bat, though, for the people I know in HR who have been great advocates of health and well-being, that when I'm discussing this, I'm not having a go at you personally, I tend to agree with you, Shu, and I think that health and well-being should not be left to advocates as such. I mean, it might seem like a strange thing. My experience is that there are some organizations have very powerful, charismatic individuals who are often in the HR department, to be honest, who take an interest in
or sales.
Or sales, yeah. And we'll take an interest in this area of work and we'll champion it. And then see within that organisation an impact because they have a person who's championing it.
Yes.
And I so again, to those champions that I've met, this is not criticism. I think I want to look more though at the structural issues, the organisational issues, which is what I think you will bring into this conversation. And I tend to agree with you, and I think it does need, because of the way corporate organisations are structured, it needs a real investment structure.
And it's. Don't get me wrong. I think if it has to be in a department now, then that's the most likely department it's going to be in. But or health and safety, obviously, depending on how big a company is. But if you start looking at companies with their diversity and inclusion programs, and equality, a lot of businesses are out there are hiring, DEI specialists or somebody specifically for, their diversity and inclusion. Whilst HR used to do that, dare I say it, or are still doing it, companies are starting to realize that we do need experts in this area and in this field. No longer is it really suitable for it to be a bolt-on to somebody else's job. And I believe you can't, I believe health and well-being should be the same. I think you can have D&I without well-being, but I don't think you can have health and well-being without including the, DEI. So I think,
what you mean by DEI?
Diversity, inclusion, and diversity, equality, and inclusion.
Yeah. So, you're going to use a lot of these spaghetti things. I'm just going to keep asking you what they mean.
Yeah, there's no problem. You ask. So as I say, I just think you look at that trajectory and how companies are starting to play out with regards to what their priorities are, and therefore recruit people accordingly. That for me is where I think workplace health and wellbeing.
My understanding of why the diversity stuff has become more embedded is that a lot of the drivers of that have been legislation and requirements placed upon organizations, and therefore they're responding to that because they sort of have no choice but to.
Okay. So now we're getting into the sort of muddy waters here, Noel, of
am I wrong or right, do you think?
Pardon?
Am I right or wrong, do you think?
Well, I think I'd like to think companies are doing it because it's the right thing to do.
Oh yeah, I'm not being cynical about it. I'm not saying.
So if I come from a point of view of
motivations for things, always. Sure.
But if I come from a point of view of, we've got a Health and Safety Act that came in 1974, and then various other legislations in 92, 99, and 2010 with regards to looking at health and safety at work. But you've got, you had huge drivers from companies to do that from a legislative point of view, from physical safety, but mental safety or mental awareness or mental health was just not considered at all. And now we're playing catch up in a sense, because realistically what we did with health and safety from a physical point of view, we should exactly be doing the same from a mental point of view. And a case in point is, psychological risk assessments or psychosocial risk assessments. So you go into any business and you're going to do something. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, every company I've gone into, I've had to, in an induction, I've had to watch a health and safety video. And I've had to sign something to say that, yes, I know how to lift a box, or if I need to change a light bulb, or don't step up a ladder. But it's all been about physical health, and none of it was around, psychological health or mental health. So, it's kind of like, let's do the right thing here. So the laws have been there, and they could have been enforced by the HSC or whoever, by the government, and they haven't. So whether or not people are going down the DEI route because there's legislation, I don't know. I'd like to think they're going down it because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be complex motivations, but there's often, I think, there are pushes, particularly within the employment sector, in terms of legislation that comes out, etc., and protections. And essentially, what you're describing in the legislative field is that there are certain types of legal protections that exist, like health and safety. Now, it can be interpreted in lots of ways, but the idea of the health and safety legislation was to protect people so they didn't get killed or injured at work, or to reduce the risk of that. And it can be flipped and manipulated in many ways, but that's essentially what it is there for. And then the idea of other types of legislation is, again, to protect people, particularly those that have identified characteristics that places them more at risk of discrimination and so on. So I think there's a dynamic interplay. I'm intrigued that your course was occupational health and now has morphed into something else. And I know there are lots of complex reasons why things change, but it's also within this context that we're talking about. Occupational health was the end of the HR process. It wasn't it? It's like that was your exit out of an organisation. Mostly was when you got referred into occupational health doctor and stuff. That you knew you were on the way out. And but it's almost like what you seem to be saying, and it may be an indication of that there's a shift maybe from that into, again, looking at what can we do to stop us getting to the point where we're exiting people because they've been they've become so damaged for whatever reason they can no longer function well. Does that seem right?
Yeah, I think again, I'm not sure how you've seen it in any context that you've worked, but you're right. Occupational health was almost like, wow, that's not good. You know, it's similar to maybe.
Well, I've seen lots of contexts. I've been referred into occupational health, and I've been the manager referring people into occupational, getting the reports and liaising with my HR business manager and all that sort of stuff. You know, so in that type of context, and I've done it in large organisations like local authorities and been part of social service and how it works in there. And I've also done it in the private sector. So if that helps, that's been my sort of experience.
Yeah, but yeah, I think. You know, when I used to walk around in corporates, although I was part of a talent acquisition team, I was always perceived as HR, and I remember the phrase, "Oh, here comes the HR police." In times gone by, that's how I think HR and occupational health has almost been seen. I like to think that HR have really, really stepped up as a department throughout the pandemic to help a lot of people. And I think occupational health is now having a resurgence where people are starting to see the value of actually what occupational health does. It's not just necessarily help people back to work. It's actually to try and keep people in work as well. And more importantly, to keep people in work. So I think that's an area where companies really will have to start looking at is, how do we keep our staff well to keep them in work? Because when they're out of work, there's an element of actually, are they going to be out of work longer, depending on what their illness is, due to obviously the strain the NHS is under and the subsequent strain, I guess, which private healthcare is going to be under as the NHS overflows and a lot of companies invest in health insurance, and the UK population starts to realise, well, the safety net of the NHS is no longer there, so I'm going to use my private healthcare. And to a point, that's going to get overrun because there are only so many doctors and there's only so many consultants that I think companies are going to need to look at how do we embed a culture and services to stop people from getting sick.
Yeah, I agree. And also,
that's why I think occupational health can really start to be part of companies, not just as a bolt-on or outsource. It always makes, I understand why companies will outsource occupational health, but it does make me wince because it's almost, we'll bring it in.
I think they outsource an element of it, not the bit you're talking about. So the element they tend to outsource is the doctor that does the report or the nurse that does the report, because they're not going to pay for a doctor to be on staff. But why should they not in some ways? And I think you and I we're on the same page, I think, in that way. In that I think particularly large organisations need to be thoughtful about the clinical services they have in-house and how those clinical services inform work in practice. Because there are certain things we know that if you do, you're going to damage people. I think to try and contextualize this so that people understand it, why is it important to try and retain staff? Okay. Does anybody want to go and visit Heathrow Airport at the moment or Manchester Airport? Those are the two big organisations at the moment that failed to retain staff. And so Heathrow was seeing 7-hour waits because they don't have the staff. Manchester even worse. And the head of Manchester Airport resigned because they completely failed. And had not predicted the market, and they are saying very clearly, you know, we cannot retrain staff overnight. We don't have them. We lost people. They've not come back to us. We cannot function. So you saw, like today, BA cancelled another 100 flights.
Right.
That's why. But if you do that, and then you think about in terms of, let's maybe narrow it to mental health. We also know, the figures are quite clear, that if somebody exits an organisation because of a mental health problem, 90% of those people are not coming back. And are probably not going back into the workforce full stop. So it's not just then an issue for that organisation in terms of turnover, loss of talent, then a society's issue.
Yes.
Because where does that person go? Well, they're not actually going back into the workforce. And we sort of know that. There's evidence for that. They're actually not going back. So where are they going to? They're still in society. And so we pick up the cost elsewhere. So I think we all have a voice in this and we all have a right on this one, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. I was at a session which I think you popped into a couple of weeks ago. The Great British Workplace Wellbeing Series, I think it was.
Yeah, I mean, I was annoyed about the name, but it was good.
It's a mouthful, isn't it?
It's like, what, we're doing a bake-off here? Get lost.
Yeah. I wasn't gonna say anything to Sadie or Simon who organised it. I just went with it.
I just thought, well done organising it.
Yeah, well, it was a good event.
The old man, I have to say.
It was a good event. Anyway, there was certain levels, there was a certain amount of panels, and I forget which panel was discussing anything. Anyway, when they went to the floor for questions, I nervously raised my hand, and I just asked the question of the panel, which was, are we asking companies to fix society's problems, and if so, is that right? I think we are, and I think it is. And actually, the panel all sort of, I didn't voice my opinion at the time. I just asked the question, but the panelists did say that. They did kind of say, well, yes, organisations are here to are helping to fix the society's problems, and it's the right thing to do. But I don't think you can have they're intertwined. I don't think you can separate them out. And long gone are the days where you left your baggage at the door, which was the advice my dad once gave me, which was when you go to work, you're professional. Whatever happens in your personal life, it's left at the door. That's long gone.
When you're in manual labour or that type of task, you could do that, but you can't in today's world because it's all soft skills that we're working with now. Group skills, people skills, personal skills, and then the specific knowledge and skills that you bring into the setting too. But if you can't be part of teams and groups of people, which you can't do if you're ill, that's the way it is, and so we have to do that. I'm intrigued by what you're saying, and the way I think about it is like this. There's similar debate has gone on in terms of schools and children's health and well-being, and schools for a long time have been saying, well, what do you expect? Why aren't the child and adolescent mental health teams doing? Well, they can't. The truth is, the mental health services, doesn't matter how much we invest in them, or the health and wellbeing services in the NHS, doesn't matter how much we invest in them, they're not going to meet that need because they meet people too far downstream when they're really costly, difficult, complicated to work with. And we have to meet people upstream before they're drowning. Hopefully before they've even got in the river in the first place. And that means we have to target the school and the workplace. Now, with schools and education, we've done it, right? There was 2017, there was a brand new health mental health set of services for schools, which focuses on having input into the school and looking at how to, not expecting the teachers to do it, but have specialists and clinicians that go in and work and are identified to work with the school. And they look at not just interventions that are clinical interventions, they look at structural and organisational interventions as well. So they're looking at the whole system and making the whole system healthy. Mm-hmm. My argument would be that as a society, we need to think about that with work, and that we need to take that approach. And I think there's a reasonable argument that organisations have which say, we can't do this, we need help, but the model that we have is broken, because the help they might look for is exactly what you said: send them off to the GP, send them off to the private sort of health services. That's never going to work, because by the time people reach that place, that's your exit strategy. They're leaving you. They're not really coming back to you if you wait that long. So from your perspective, what are the sort of changes that you think need to happen, sort of root and branch, as it were?
There would be cultural changes, I think, within organisations. And I think, I must have read abstracts and conclusions of about 100 research papers for my essays, for my masters. And every single time the same things come up with regards to what causes psychosocial problems within workplaces, or shall we say mental health in workplaces. And it's job load, it's the resources, it's the relationships, it's change of job and how much control you have over a job. And those dynamics don't change. They've been there. We've known about this, since Karasek did a model in 1979. We've known about these issues, but businesses, don't really, look at targeting. And that for me is something which takes, a lot of time and a lot of influence and persuasion to do, because ultimately you're probably likely to saying to people, we're probably likely to say to leaders of businesses, we want your staff to work less. Right. We want you to pay them more, but actually work less. And what business model is going to approve that, in a sense? So there is a commercial aspect to it, but then it's, well, what do you get if you don't do this? Which is what we're seeing with regards to billions lost in absenteeism, every year, and people not returning to work and turnover. So I do think it's a case of, we've got to take it step by step. And if we had a utopia, a well-being utopia, it would be starting where B corporations, if I can use that idea, is going. So B corporations are companies that sign up to a movement, shall we say, where they look after people, profit, and planet. So the whole business, it's almost like corporate responsibility or ESG, but the whole movement is around being, what they do is good for their business, but it's good for the people in the business, and it's good for the planet. Well, what they also find is that they will buy off each other because they've signed up to this, to this program. Right. We had investors in people in times gone past. If
I remember.
Yeah. Well, you don't really see that a lot these days. But I think if companies start to look at having a purpose, and people go to work for that company because of the purpose of that business, not the profit, the main function of that business is to do good, or to add purpose, then I think that starts to change the narrative and the culture of a business. I was on a webinar the other day, and a lady came out with such a great phrase with regards to you've got to see how well-being is part of the business strategy with regards to how you start to win customers and actually and relate it down to the win business because of your well-being. So how do you get your well-being actually winning business for you, in a sense that a company will only work with another company if they're actually taking care of their people.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like, we've got the green market, and we've got various markets that have emerged. And I think the health and wellbeing market is one that is emerging. It's a brand new emerging market. And it's also, I think it fits into ethical practice in that broader sense. And I think consumers are interested
Yes.
in consumption.
So we're coming back to that society piece. So, would you go and buy a cruise off P&O at the moment?
No.
Would you even go and buy a cruise? But you've seen my point. So
I probably would buy a cruise. I mean, I'm getting to the age where that's quite attractive to me.
So society, I think society has a part to play here. We've got to look at us. Ultimately, I think we've got to look at ourselves. When VW had the whole emissions scandal, I still see plenty of VWs on the road. They didn't really hit their profits that badly. Or if they did, they bounced back pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
So I do think there's that aspect of, are we, look at ourselves internally and are we prepared a little bit more to spend maybe a little bit more because a company has integrity and is looking after their staff, and obviously we know they're doing good for the world. So, it's things like that which I think. If companies are seeing that society are making those changes, or vice versa, that they start to look at how they.
VW is interesting. This is a really interesting example because they did that scam with diesels, and interestingly, they've changed their business model fairly recently, and they're no longer going for large market share. They're trying to look at profit margins, and so they're now. Vectoring into looking at sort of the luxury market, or what might be called quality market.
Right.
I think it's interesting. I think it is, there is a very clear push from people willing to think about those issues. Because I mean, like if I just on a simple level, like with food, for example, if I think about a corner shop, which is now stocked up with, and this would now, I mean, I'm 55.
You don't look it.
I know I do, to be honest. It's sort of, tonight I do. I'm really tired.
Right.
I look more than 55 tonight, to be honest. But if I think about even 10 years ago, what I see in my local corner shop, I would never have seen. So I see lots of organic produce. I see produce. Yeah. I see healthy food choices, no sugar, no salt, etc., etc. Yeah. That's in my local corner shop. That's not in a specialist large sort of, and these things are prominently displayed. There's a good variety and good choices. There's things like fair trade coffee, etc., etc. And all of that stuff is there. It's not difficult to find, and it's actually sort of pretty. It's not, the price difference isn't huge as well, to be honest. Not in a local corner shop anyway, and not in a local supermarket, to be honest. So the markets change, and the habits of consumers change, and they change radically, and they change quickly, in my experience. And I think actually there is a stronger agenda now. And I wonder, and maybe you can talk to this a little bit, I wonder if the pandemic and the experience of that has shifted work culture sufficiently so that people might be a bit more demanding around this.
Yeah, I think there has been a mental shift from what I can see in the UK and potentially globally. I think it depends on how badly the pandemic hit, or how badly it was perceived. Because also in the US, we're seeing the Great Resignation, as they're calling it, where people are just quitting their jobs with nowhere to go. They're just saying, "I've had enough. You're not treating me well. I'm worth more, so I'm off." And I think they're probably going to try and ride it out and think, well, sooner or later, these people are going to have to come back to work. Well, yes, they will, but they'll go back to better jobs, possibly. I don't think we've seen it in the UK, and I don't think we'll see it in the UK. We'll touch wood, we won't. But I do think a lot of people had a lot of time to think.
Yeah.
And if we think about it, we were all asked to do what we were told or what we believed was the right thing to do, to look after and protect each other. And that's I think that gets to the core of humanity.
I agree, actually, yeah.
Whether or not we had to do it, because, whatever your theories are on COVID, the fact is we did do that. And I do think a lot of people started questioning their values and purpose, and valued things a bit more. You couldn't go to funerals, you couldn't get married, you couldn't see. And I just think people had a bit of a reset about it. And I think companies did as well. Now, some companies aren't going to change their ways, what I'm finding is that companies are looking to do, they need to do, they want to do something, they need to do something, but don't know what to do. And then they do get themselves in a bit of a muddle, and think mental health first aid is the way out, and or the answer, when clearly it's not. And there are obviously some companies that I would imagine, would be doing, what we're talking about already, and, are selling the weight, or are trailblazers in terms of,
yeah, I mean, that's all of that's true. All of that's true. I'm going to come back to the sort of pandemic thing, because I think, from a psychological perspective, what happened is what I, as a psychologist, would expect. Because what happens to humans in groups when we face an existential crisis is that we band together. It's never, ever like The Walking Dead. It's all that dystopian stuff is absolutely nonsense. That's never what happened. And if you talk to people, say, who went through the Second World War in London and stuff like that, the only thing they remember is, the friendships and the connections that they made to people. And that's not rose-tinted spectacles. That's fact. That's what happened. Yeah. Because with an existential crisis, our herd nature comes out, our flocking nature comes out, and we get closer. We look after each other. And I think that's what happened with the pandemic. And another interesting thing, because the pandemic was global, so that was one thing about it. It was an existential crisis that faced the whole world at the same time. And it was probably the first time in 100 years that we could all say, even the Second World War wouldn't be this.
Yeah.
But we can literally say everybody in the world was going through the same thing. You know. And there was
together.
There was a definite identification. I had the same experience as somebody in Timbuktu. Right, it was the same type of experience, and so there was a connection there on a global scale. And secondly, I think the big driver was things like this going online, Zoom, stuff like that. Nobody had heard of Zoom before. I had, but most people had. And suddenly we were online, globally connected with a global existential threat. And that was really, really significant, because what it did was exactly what you're saying, psychologically demonstrated to us that we're herd animals and that we are deeply connected and really need each other.
Yeah.
And I think it absolutely 100% made that clear. Another thing, and just thinking about guys in particular, because you and I are both guys, and you've been in the corporate world, and there's a lot of pressure on guys to be providers, go out there. There's still a differential in the marketplace. There's still a differential in what you get paid and all that sort of stuff, which leads to even in dual income households, it's often the guy will get more money than the woman, and the household will rely on that income much more. But one thing I came across, I don't know if this is what you came across in terms of work culture, was a lot of the guys I knew and know, and these are people in very senior positions in organizations, were like, this is the best time for me ever that I've had. I'm with my family, I'm with my kids more.
Yes.
I'm thinking about myself more.
Yeah.
I'm disconnecting from that sort of all the nonsense I used to get involved with in the corporate structure and the politics.
Right.
Getting my job done. But I'm actually, there's something really fundamentally important is happening to me. I'm part of the life of my family, and they're part of my life in a way that's never happened before. And I know quite a lot of executives at C-suite and so on who've just refused to go back to the office in the way it was, and are still working from home and all that sort of stuff. And I wonder if you've come across that experience as well, particularly amongst men. I think there's been a significant shift in male attitudes to work and work culture.
Well, since I haven't been in the corporate world since the pandemic, it's hard. I'm going to say I'm going to try and dodge it realistically.
Okay.
It's hard for me to say, because as I say, I haven't really been in that environment to comment. When I've spoke to people, and when I'm, from a social point of view, friends, family, and I guess on a professional level, what I'm finding is that there is an element of being more open about your mental health and how you're feeling, to a degree where I think there's a little transparency and honesty about that, because what I also am conscious of, people saying, I've got a mental health issue when I haven't, but it seems trendy, so I'm just going to say that, and I think that's equally is dangerous, but you shouldn't ignore it.
Mhm.
But I do think what you're describing is something where, you know, people are forced into realizing what they were missing.
Mm.
And I think, you know, I think this starts coming down to you, to your drivers and to your values and potentially an upbringing with regards to, you know, what's valuable to you in life. And if you're at home and you're starting to being able to bath your kids if they're of that age, or you're able to take them to football and watch them play football, as long as you've got your mobile and you can keep up to date with emails and things like that, it shows you can actually have a life outside of work. And is it a case of work's fitting around life, or is now life fitting around work, or, you know, vice versa? So I think there's an element that there's an aspect of it can be done, but that brings its own, maybe some of its own concerns with people not switching off to a degree, in a sense. You know, they're always they're always on.
Yeah, I mean, they're always.
But it's interesting that if, again, I'm just sort of weighing up in my mind, questioning those sort of motivators and drivers of, you know, of C-suite as to, you know, what is it? Maybe they weren't getting in work, which they're getting at home potentially, and or what was motivating them to get to that position so high up in the business. Are those drivers still there, or you know, is it a case of, you know, I think it's a case of that was the only way they knew, but now there's obviously been an opportunity to change, or at least shift their mindset, and that's, you know, that's led them to think, well, actually, I'm getting to a stage where maybe I have made a good career for myself, but have I been much of a father, or much of a husband, or much of a brother, or what have you? So, or much of a, you know, much of a son to maybe elderly parents. So, yeah, I think there's a lot that's been going on, but how that's now going to be portrayed in C-suite, I'm not too sure. I'd like to think, from my angle, is that, you know, if they are noticing and recognizing things within themselves, that doesn't become a barrier for them not being able to implement and allow services, or that structure, or that support into their employees and into their business.
I mean, again, it's about sort of culture, coming back to that sort of issue of culture, and where does culture come from? I mean, obviously it's a complex issue, but there's something, I think, maybe an emergent conversation going on about that, you know, what the currency is, what it is that the work is offering us. I mean, I come from a sort of, I mean, I had quite utopianist views at times about work and life.
Me too. Yeah.
And that's okay. I don't mind that. So like, I remember way back in time reading some of Karl Marx's early work on the importance of work, not just as an economic thing, but the importance for the soul of the human.
Yes. Yeah.
He would often talk in those terms. And then lots of theorists about work, and certainly I, as a mental health professional, really understand the importance of people being in productive, meaningful activity.
Absolutely.
And it's really, really crucial in terms of mental health to be part of that. And also, there are elements of mental health, such as financial security, which have to be in place. Otherwise, you can't feel secure. You know, if you can't pay your bills and you can't eat, with the best will in the world, with the best coaching, with the best therapy in the world, you're going to feel rough. You know, if you don't have a home, if you don't have food, if you don't have heating. And so those types of things are all real things that we need to factor in. But I do think there's a new possible currency emerging, which is about quality of life, and what does your job offer you that?
Yes.
As well as the salary.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I agree.
That's a crucial conversation to open up.
Yeah, and I think, you know, work should be good for you. And you know, when I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, and that's normally a strap line I leave on one or two of my posts, that, you know, let's make work good for us. And you know, that's a utopia. And I think, you know, work can be bad for us, and it's bad for, you know, it's bad for a lot of people, as you know, you'll see. Well, you know, we can see from any number of reports, but it is looking at how do we make work good for us. And I was again, I attended another lecture through my university course, and the lady who was talking says that the view of the business, well, certainly from her point of view, of what workplace well-being is, and I kind of subscribe to it, and I've stolen it a few times, but it's is somebody's life better for working for this company?
Yes.
Have we made their life better? Yeah. Are they, and not just from the employee, but also from the employer? Is the employer making people's lives better? And I think that's what we should look at from a work utopia point of view. If we have every leader or whoever's making decisions, financial or HR decisions, whatever we do at our core, is this making the lives of the people we've entrusted and we've employed to do what we've asked them to do, are their lives better for it? And ask themselves that question, and make a decision based on that. And that's maybe a very humanistic sort of view. But I'll come back to the P&O debacle. I just.
It's like seriously.
But the thing, I think I had a conversation with a friend, and it's like, whoever that decision maker was, what was going through that person's mind to think that was the right thing to do? Get it? Let 800 people go to save, I think they've employed 4,000, so to save 3,200 jobs. Okay, I understand, I get that, but what point did you think that was okay? And and this comes back to the values of that individual. What, how and why did they think it was okay? And therefore, what's happened in their life for them to think, actually, yes, this is what we're going to do. I know this is going to be a hard decision for that person, but
yeah, I mean, it's that age-old thing: does the end justify the means? And I don't think it does. I think you have to look at the means as part of the ends. So that your journey to something is as important as where you get. And if you can't journey towards something in a way that's ethical, humane, compassionate, it's probably not worth having, to be honest. It really isn't. And I think P&O is a really interesting example. And I think probably in your field, it's going to be something that's discussed for the next 50 years, to be honest. Yeah. It is insane what they did.
I mean, it's illegal what they've done from a human resources point of view. I mean, and the point I was, just to reflect on that point is, when that decision was made, it was a case of, okay, we have to maybe let 800 people go to save, 3/4 of the business. But I get that, but it's the understanding of how it was done as well. I mean, that's the thing is, okay, we've made that hard decision, and it may be done with a heavy heart, but to then, do a 3-minute pre-recorded video without any, comeback, it was just, to me was
no, it's fun. What it brings to mind, because I used to work in social services and I used to work with refugees, and there was a time limit on how long we could support them.
Yeah.
When their legal stay was out, there was no longer. And I remember saying to quite a few people, well, we've come to the end of our support, but there was no point at which somebody got the impression that I was personally trying to throw them out on the street.
Yeah.
Ship. We were discussing options and reality.
Yeah, exactly.
There was always reality was there. The services were going to come to an end. That's it. That's the way it is. That's life. But let's talk about these human beings and figure out what we're going to do with this together.
But I was, my utopia, and I think I kind of commented to this with some chap on LinkedIn, was, wouldn't it have been wonderful if health and well-being laws prevented this from happening? I know it shouldn't have happened anyway, obviously, because it was illegal and they knew they were breaking the law, but they did it anyway. But it was obviously, they knew that they probably will get fined for it, or if not, I think they already have been, but they will probably get fined.
It may well be prison as well, to be honest. It's sort of like, it's really serious stuff.
It's maybe, what did you say?
There may well be some prison sentences coming.
Well, I think that needs to happen now.
Yeah, I'm with you, to be honest.
I honestly believe that has to happen, so the pain is felt by that decision maker, because otherwise companies will just continue to do this because they'll weigh up the financial collateral
We get a
and
fine,
say, yeah,
but actually the
well,
company
we're going to do it anyway. I mean, we knew we were breaking the law, and we didn't want to get trade unions involved because they knew they wouldn't like it. So we did. I mean,
it literally said
it's
that,
just getting away with,
crazy.
So I do think that's what has to happen until you penalize, not financially, but take that person away from their family, and the shame and is what I think is going to start to change, drive those decisions not to be made again. Because if, from a legal perspective, they'll find loopholes, or they'll just pay the fine. And if it's 20 million, it's 20 million.
It's the water companies, certain water companies at the moment paying the fines around sludge into rivers, and they don't give a shit. They just factor into their financial.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. There has to come a point at which those types of things are looked at and are embedded. In terms of, from your research, can you think of, has there been examples of organisations that have done things well? I can think of one, and have got good bottom line improvements because of that. My view is, if you have a psychologically healthy organisation, it's going to be healthy on every level, because I happen to understand that because work is a collective group experience. If you're psychologically well, the group is functioning well, and every other function of the group then improves. I know that there's objective evidence. Can you think of organisations that have invested appropriately and have got these types of outcomes?
Well, I'm going to say no, because I can't. And to me, that's a case of probably I haven't done the research into businesses more thoroughly enough. Because I'm going to caveat that with that. Yes, okay, we can look at the bottom line as maybe, okay, you've invested X amount in well-being and culture, and therefore your bottom line's increased, but has it been as a direct correlation with the investment made into to health and well-being or staff culture? Could it have been because of something else? But I also know that I've seen companies win awards for excellent health and well-being initiatives, and their staff demonstrating or saying that they're happy in work, and known people who have been utterly miserable within the work. So there'll always going to be those pockets, which I suppose you can expect. But I think this is still a bit of a I won't say an argument, but it's still a bit of debate in the wellbeing world. Is how do you measure return on investment on wellbeing strategies or employing or have your or what's called return on value in some cases, because it's very difficult to pin it down. We can give out all sorts of information or you can research all sorts of information about how much it's costing companies. And there is obviously evidence out there, as you rightly say, that if you invest in your employees, then you're probably going to have a happier workforce and therefore more productive, and that makes sense that that's going to improve the bottom line. I mean, that's quite simplistic thinking, right? And you would think that, but
it doesn't even need to be much more complicated than that.
Actually, no, you're absolutely right.
One of the examples I can think of, and it's an interesting example, thinking about the car manufacturing example. It used to be the case that the Volvo cars made in a particular factory in Kalmar in Sweden were highly sought. I don't know if it still is. And the reason for it is because they reorganized the way the work was done. And rather than have a traditional sort of production line with machines doing, they had work groups. So they organized everything in circles, literally physically in circles. They had work benches, and they had groups of people who knew each other and would rotate around different bits of the car, and formed strong relationships. Their absenteeism was virtually zero.
Yeah.
As a consequence. So every measure of health and well-being went through the roof.
Yeah.
The cars were slightly more expensive, but they were so highly sought after because the quality of them was the best car you could ever buy. Even comparing them to other Volvos, and Volvos happen to produce very good quality cars.
Yeah.
But that particular factory produced the best quality, and so those cars, they retained their value. They sold and all that sort of stuff. So there's been examples like that I can think.
I has to guess there's going to be there's probably hundreds of thousands of examples out there of implementing a an intervention or initiative well, and it working. There's obviously loads of examples of implementing an intervention or initiative not so well and it's not working. And one thing that's coming out through my studies is it's all very well getting the data and finding out where the issues are, and then saying, yes, we have this intervention, or we're going to implement this initiative. But it can quite easily fail because the implementation is not good, and it's more likely to fail. Then yes, we have a problem. We know what the solution is. It's the implementation, which is likely to be the issue, because of either A, how it's communicated, B, there could be resistance within the business. There can be all sorts of people coming and going.
Well, I would hazard a guess I know why the implementation fails. It's because people don't factor in the relational factor.
Of course, yeah.
It happens in my field. I was talking to, I'm going to be doing some training in an organisation around health, some aspects of health and wellbeing issues, and I'm going via the disability team and diversity team and stuff like that. And I was talking about evidence-based therapies, and people said, "Oh no, we don't want to talk about CBT because everybody's had CBT. It's horrible." And I'm like, "Well, the evidence is this, that it works, but it's spread so quickly that a lot of practitioners are taught how to do it from a book." Manualized therapy, are not taught those other softer elements about engaging with people, looking at motivational interventions and supporting people in making changes. And therefore, often that people can experience CBT as though, well, it's literally somebody's reading from a book. That might work for some people, but for the vast majority of people, that doesn't work. And it's and that's why I think I'm intrigued in talking to you, because you are training properly in how to do your job. You're getting the qualifications, but a lot of people are moving into the health and wellbeing workplace health and wellbeing are not doing that at all. I do have my head in my hands with the crap that goes on.
And I think that will get, people will wise up to it. It's finding its feet. As I say, similar to the pandemic when people all of a sudden had to work from home and change. I think the wellbeing industry, health and wellbeing industry at work has always been there, but it's now got the spotlight on them, and it's finding its feet. There's no quick win, and that's the issue here, and that's the thing.
That's right.
If you're looking to implement an intervention in a workplace, you got to do your data, you got to do your research, and you got to start collecting data now, and then maybe look at collecting data, every 6 months for 2 years, and then look at the initiative. And it's not, that's the issue. I think companies expect something quick, and there is no quick fix, and this is something that will require a certain set of skills, a certain amount of budget, and continuing improvement and building the scaffolding around what's already there. So you can't go from the hard shoulder to the fast lane. I also
think it needs a big shift, and it's like my profession has a problem with this, because again, as a specialist, what I do is I pick people up often too far downstream, and I can help and treat them and provide provision and stuff like that. But actually, my interest and focus, and I think where we need to be around this stuff, is before people get in the river in the first place, prevention and avoidance are the key things here, I think. And in the same way as health and safety at work,
absolutely.
You don't want to be putting the floor's wet sign up after somebody's fallen over and broken their hip. You want it up before they slip, so they don't break their hip. And it's exactly the same thing, I think, around the broader aspects of psychological health.
And with that, you're looking at psychosocial risk assessments. And that to a degree is, again, job demands, job control, what support, what relationships do you have, how much change you're going to have in the
more than that, Stuart, and I'm bigging you up, it requires people who know what the hell they're doing.
Of course it does.
That's what it requires.
You
can't buy in some people who are going to tell you, get everybody to tell us their stories about, I'll tell my story about
it requires thought leadership
that way.
No, it doesn't. It requires thought leadership. It requires cultural change management, project management. You kind of need disruptors within the business. You need people who can be influencers, but yet be friendly. Yes, raising awareness is very, very key. It's critical and it's crucial. But coming in and doing an awareness day and then do nothing about it doesn't help. Coming in and saying, I've had a mental breakdown.
In some ways, it does worse, because what you do is you raise expectations, and actually what you do is you confirm that you don't give a shit. It's just you're ticking a box.
But that's first base. So if if somebody comes in and has had, for example, there's a lot of talk now that C-suite senior leaders should talk about their mental health.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's great if they want to. They don't have to, I don't personally believe, but if they want to, that's great. But that's just first step on the ladder. That's creating awareness. That's being open. That's being vulnerable. That's trying to create a safe place to talk. That's all very well, but if the work is a problem, it doesn't matter what your CEO is saying with regards to how they're struggling or have struggled and they've learned.
Stop you there, because I think that's the issue, and we have run out of time. If work is a problem, we have to sort that out. Yeah. Okay, if that's what's making us ill, we have to sort that out. And we do need people like you in organisations who are willing to say that, who are willing to speak truth to power. And a good example of what happens when you don't speak truth to power is the awful stuff that we're seeing in Ukraine at the moment, because nobody spoke truth to that daughter, right? And if you don't speak truth to power, that's the damage you have. Yep. Or also, on a smaller scale, you have this ridiculous P&O nonsense that's going. Or you have the ridiculous scenes in Manchester Airport, ridiculous scenes in Heathrow Airport, right? That's what happens if people are in there saying, no, you're wrong, mate. That's not the way to do things.
And this was the conversation I would have several times a week with hiring managers in my recruitment career.
Yeah.
When, they would say, I want someone who's twice as good as what we've lost and half the money. You're kind of like,
no, you're talking.
Okay, so how do we round this square peg? And again, that's what you need within organizations.
I agree. We do have to finish out. I told you we'd run out of time. Everybody who comes onto my show goes, I can't do a whole hour. Did you mean, where's all the questions? Where they were? It's great. It's been fantastic to have you on, Stuart, and we'll circle back with you, I hope, at some point.
Yeah, we can do a part 2.
Future, and bring you back. We didn't even get into why you come into this field, which is a very interesting conversation. Yeah. We're going to leave it there. You stay there. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody, and I will see you all next week. I have no idea who is on, as usual, but it'll be somebody interesting and fantastic, as usual. So I'm going to say goodbye for now, and I'll see you all next week. You stay there, Stuart. So bye-bye.